Hello and welcome to the All Out Brits Podcast, the podcast where we send the house on all things NFL from across the seas here in wonderful old Britain and England. And as always, we're here to talk about another week, the final week, unfortunately, of the regular season of the NFL. And as always, there was plenty going on. This week, we had more dislocated Jalen Hurts fingers than we had points for the Panthers. And we also had the same amount of interceptions in the Dolphins and Bills game as we did head coaches being fired. So we know that we've had a lot of stuff go on this week and there's a lot to talk about. And as always, the man to be joining us on this journey is Mr. Elliot Greenwood. Elliot, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing really, really well, pal. It's been a long season. It's been a very enjoyable season. And we've been here to talk about most of it, haven't we, Taz, on the pod?
We have.
And yeah, what an enjoyable season it's been, and how much are we looking forward to the playoffs? I can't even describe how exciting it's going to be. And playoff football is finally here. And once again, Taryn, we're going to be talking all about it. And I cannot wait, mate. It's going to be such a good pod and such a good way to finish the season.
I know. And for some reason, people aren't too happy about us talking about all things NFL. They clearly aren't happy about us bringing the Brits over or the Blitz. And I want to address that now. Let's get this sorted. Me and Mr. Greenwood here are American through and through. Doesn't matter if it says British on the podcast. We are American through and through. We've watched American films. We grew up on American TV shows. The Star Spangled Banner, we are absolutely enamored with it. We fantasize about American women. We always want to drive American cars. We absolutely love everything about American culture. The amount of American food that me and Mr. Elliot get through. The amount of American beer that me and Mr. Elliot get through. The amount of American clothes and brands that we've purchased from. It's just endless. We are American through and through. We are Sloppy Joe. We are everything. We are Eagles at heart.
I'm not an eagle at heart. Can I just say that? I'm not an eagle at heart. How about them Cowboys? One thing I would say, though, these Americans, they keep saying that after they win the Super Bowl, the world champions. Well, if you're not accepting a couple of British lads coming on, chatting about your sport, then you champions of what? Champions of what? You're not even champions of your continent. Just champions of your country. Like, what's the point? Like, grow up.
The NFL is trying to go global. It's trying to grow. It's trying to be inclusive. And it is mostly inclusive. And that's what we like to promote and champion. We have no clue. We're learning. We still don't know about salary caps. We don't know what players are being picked. But we're learning. And as long as you join us on that journey, you'll enjoy everything that goes on in this podcast. Absolutely. I'm glad that they don't know that the real reason is because we're not qualified enough to talk about English football. So stop with American.
But yeah, exactly. But do you know what, mate? We have a good laugh, don't we?
We do.
And that's all that matters, really. Who cares that we just chat pure waffle? Who cares? The Americans, obviously, because they don't give up giving us grief. But we're doing good, lad. We're doing good. We're a couple of. You can't expect a lot from a couple of rookies, can you? We're late round draft picks. Just give us this week off, and we'll be back next week with some better things to say.
Of course. And speaking of waffle, why don't we go straight into it and get into 2-minute drill and get into everything that went on in week 18, starting in a fashion that people wouldn't expect, trying to get to the end as fast as we can. Mr. Elliot Greenwood, are you ready to talk us through everything that went on in week 18?
The first week 18 ever in the NFL, and it's an exciting one. So yeah, let's get into it, bro.
Okay. Here we go. 186.
Right, there we go. Ravens backups versus the Steelers. How bad is Tyler Huntley, by the way? He's so bad. He's bloody Margot Robbie bad. That's how bad he is. Steelers win. They make the playoffs, but no TJ Watt moving forward. So we'll see how that transpires for their defense. Colts versus the Texans. CJ Stroud needs to change his name. He's CJ Goat. He's so good. He carried his team over the line. What an unbelievable rookie season he's had. But the Colts, on 4th and 2, when you're giving Jonathan Taylor 30 carries, why are you leaving him off the field? You give it to your third-string running back, and he drops it, a wide-open pass. Ridiculous. Your season's on the line. You've got to do better than that. Titans versus the Jags. Trevor Lawrence, hang your head in shame. That was a disgraceful game. And what a shocking way that the Jags have ended the season. Did not look like a Doug Peterson team at all. Disgraceful. Lions versus the Vikings. The Lions won, but probably not as comfortable as you'd like against the Minnesota Vikings team. But one thing to say about the Vikings is Justin Jefferson. He is high draft stock next season. He has been unbelievable since coming back. I think next season in fantasy, no matter who the QB is there in Minnesota, go after him in the early first round. Saints versus the Falcons. Saints absolutely demolished the Falcons and ultimately ending Arthur Smith's reign of mid. Finally, he's gone. But who do they go next? We'll have a little bit of a chat about the head coach's task because it's been really interesting this week to see who's gone. Panthers versus the Bucs. Not really how you'd like to start a playoff run if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 0 touchdowns in a 9-0 win over the worst team in the league. But at least they're in. That's all we can say. At least they're in. Bengals versus the Browns. The Bengals finished 9-8, ultimately missing out on the playoffs. But obviously, they've had no Joe Burrow all season. Most of the season. What do you expect? They've done well to get where they are. Pats versus the Jets. Who actually cares? That's an absolute disgrace. Packers versus the Bears. Love back to looking elite. He looked really good. It's 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a comfortable win in a game where Fields just ultimately couldn't get it done. He couldn't finish his drives. And those drives that didn't get finished are ones that are going to get finished by Caleb Williams next season. And I've had a lot of hate about my Caleb Williams selection and people drafting him and keeping Jalen and keeping Fields. But for me, Fields is done. He's played his last game in Chicago. Rams versus the 49ers. The 49ers would be like this without Brock Purdy throwing the ball. Without him throwing the rock, this is your team, Taz. They are not a good team without Brock Purdy, and without CMC, they just don't click at all, do they, mate? It was a pretty shocking display. Raiders versus Denver, 8 years now that there's been no playoffs coming to Denver, and ultimately a very disappointing season for both franchises. Giants versus the Eagles. Did you see it? Yes. Cry Eagles, cry. I'm gonna love it. I really want the 8 from the Eagles fans. Go and give me it. You were shocking. You've been shocking all season. 10-0 you were, and then you've crumbled, absolutely crumbled. Come on, give me the hate because Cowboys are going all the way, and you are shocking. You are absolutely shocking. You do nothing. And also a game that ended. That meant that Brown got injured, and obviously your prize jewel in your quarterback, Jalen Hurts, he got injured as well. So you're losing to Tampa Bay next week, and I'm going to love watching that game. Cowboys versus the Commanders, 4 touchdowns for MV Prescott, and an absolutely brilliant season for him, finishing the season with 36 touchdowns for him, and ultimately winning the NFC East. Do you know, Taryn, there's not been a back-to-back winner of the NFC East since the Eagles did it in 2004. 19 years, one of the most competitive divisions in football. Seahawks win versus the Cardinals, not much to say about that one. And then finally, the game of the week, the game we all anticipated was going to be unbelievable. And we did say the cleaner quarterback would win the game. Miami versus Buffalo. Buffalo win and ultimately win their division. They go from the 5 seed, maybe missing out on the playoffs altogether at one point, all the way up to securing the 2 seed, and they look like a really good team now. But what a fall from grace it's been for Miami. But yeah, that's 2 minutes, boy. That's the week 18 of the NFL season, and it's been a fun one. Is that the last 2 minutes of the season? We'll see. But yeah, we've had a lot to talk about, haven't we, mate? And it's been a pleasure.
We will. Wonderful as always, mate. Getting better and better. And you finished on a great note with the game of the week, which we talked about, the cleaner quarterback question that we talked about. And it came very apparent that even though both of them threw the exact same amount of picks, it was one who managed to get the job done in the Bills and the Dolphins game, and that was Mr. Josh Allen. We've said it many a times before. That Bills team is not a team that you want to face, and they've taken some very big scalps this season. Josh Allen, we talked heavily about last week, about his potential, about how good he's been. Is this going to be the year for the Bills where they make a really late playoff push? Obviously, Kansas aren't the formidable team that we know them to be as of yet. They've got big competition in the division as well when you look at the fact that the Ravens are cooking. But if there was ever a time for the Bills to push on, to get further than they've ever gone before, is it this year?
I think it has to be. They've got to grab it by the balls, haven't they? It's going to be a season where the playoffs in the Midwest are going to be absolutely freezing. It's going to be, like we mentioned before, it's going to be key that they don't turn the ball over. And obviously this week they did. Josh Allen had 2 interceptions. But what he did also have was a hell of a lot of completions. He went 30 for 38, 360 yards just about, and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, like we said, he had those 2 interceptions. But that is a really, really, really solid completion percentage. And he just looked like he had a really good game. Some of the throws that he had those interceptions on were just shocking reads and shocking plays. So you really did see the best and the worst of Josh Allen in that game. But he also got 67 yards with his legs as well. So he's doing it in both sides, on the ground and in the air. And if he can cut out those stupid, silly mistakes on 4th and 2, trying to throw to the end zone instead of just trying to get it past the sticks, then Buffalo look formidable. The defense has been getting it done, getting turnovers, which they've had to do to support Josh Allen. And now Josh Allen is starting to click a little bit. Finishing the season 5-0, they go from 6-6, where they ultimately look like they were going to miss out on the playoffs, to now 5-0. And look brilliant to finish the season. 11-6, and like you said, taking some big teams, taking some wins off some massive teams along the way, and ultimately a season that I think the Bills can be quite happy with, in all honesty, getting that 2 seed when no one thought they could. Everyone completely wrote them off, but we didn't, Taz. We supported Josh Allen all the way, didn't we?
Oracles, mate, absolute oracles. And like you said there, the Bills team, they're just clicking. We've seen them not click this season. We've seen them look like they were absolutely out of it, absolutely terrible. But they've managed to come back. Since they beat the Eagles, they've been absolutely formidable. They've picked up wins along the way. And that's what we want to see in the NFL. We want to see these elite teams, elite players doing well and make it competitive. But the other team on the other side of it, the Dolphins, the most dynamic offense we've been saying all season in the NFL. And I just don't know what's going on with them. We've said it so many times. In the big games, the Dolphins can't get it done. As good as Mike McDaniel is, as good as the players are, when it counts, they just can't get over the line. I don't know if you saw, but my man, Mr. Chris Wilkins, must have been so frustrated because he resorted to sticking his hand down Josh Allen's pants, trying to grab a few there, because he just couldn't get a hand on the ball. Even though there was interceptions galore, they couldn't get a hand on the ball, and they couldn't get a hand on the division title as well. Where is it not clicking for the Dolphins?
Well, they couldn't get a hand on much, but what Chris Wilkins did get a hand on was Josh Allen's big balls, and he showed that in that game, did Josh Allen. But looking at the quarterback he was facing, Tua turned the ball over Vailoa. He was just terrible. 178 yards for him. And when you say that, when he's got 2 interceptions as well, but he's also got one of the best receiving cores in the league. He's got such a dynamic offense, and it's got to be down to him at this point. When you've got Tyreek Hill and you've got Jalen Waddle, then you've got Devon A-Chain in the backfield, along with Raheem Mostert, who's had 20 touchdowns this season. It's a disgrace, I think, from Tua that he didn't get the job done that week.
Yeah.
And also, they're going ahead to play the Kansas City Chiefs in a game that looks like there's going to be snowstorms, it's going to be absolutely freezing, and it's going to be about 10 degrees Fahrenheit or whatever stupid system the Americans use to measure the temperature. And interestingly, Taz, Tua, being from Hawaii, he's 0-4 when it's below 40 degrees this season. I think that's really interesting. Yeah. And when you go into Arrowhead on the road, those little things, the weather, the stadium, they all creep up on you, and they ultimately kind of all those odds, when they're stacked against you and the odds are stacked in the favour of the home team, they have a massive difference. And we mentioned kind of the Dolphins not doing much in the postseason. And I think, to be honest, now they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think either of us can see them doing anything in the playoffs. That's my opinion, but I don't know what you think about that, Taz.
I really do think it's going to be a great day for Kansas, because I know they've struggled. I know they haven't been exactly where they want to be. But Mahomes, Kelsey, everyone having a little bit of a rest, rejoining, and coming off, for the Dolphins, a game where they just didn't look their best. I think the Chiefs at Arrowhead, like you mentioned, they've got to kick on. Surely they can't crumble to a team that just crumble in the big occasion. And like you mentioned there, it's going to be hostile, it's going to be cold, and Tua's going to have to make sure he's nice, wrapped up and warm, because if not, I'm sure Chris Jones has got extra motivations to come give him a nice little hug. But you mentioned there one quarterback in Tua not being able to get it done, but we'll switch over to another quarterback in the AFC who did get it done this week in Mr. CJ Stroud. Elliot, I don't know what we're going to do on this podcast. We might just have to change it to the CJ Stroud and the Texans podcast because we're clearly enamored by them. And it's really hard not to be when you see just everything about this team. You know, the rookies, the coaching staff, the aura, everything about it is just so amazing to watch. And to be honest with you, in the Colts and the Texans game, I think we were quite happy if either team won because they both deserved it to go through and to be seeded. But for the Texans to do it, a team that we've talked about quite a bit, what did it mean to you and what do you think it means to the franchise as well?
The rebuild is well and truly complete after one season. One season they've had him for. He's a rookie quarterback. That is the best rookie season ever, in my opinion. I've lost superlatives. I've run out of superlatives to describe CJ Stroud. He's been absolutely incredible. And just to show how incredible he's been this season, I've found a really, really interesting stat, Taz. There's only 3 quarterbacks in NFL history who have led the NFL in the touchdown to interception ratio and yards per game. Not rookies, just general quarterbacks. There's CJ Stroud, Joe Montana, and Tom Brady.
Elite
Joe
company,
Montana
eh?
and Tom Brady. 2 other Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and CJ Stroud is now getting to the point where he's been compared to these players. He has been absolutely electric and unbelievable all season. And now the Houston have a home playoff game. How exciting is that for the Texans, who were one of the worst teams in football last season, and now they've ultimately got to a point where they're hosting a playoff game. That is one of the best achievements from any franchise ever, in my opinion. What a turnaround it's been. The coaching staff, the coordinators, they've done a superb job. But like you said, you mentioned the rookies that he's got around him. Collins as well. He had an absolute day. 9 receptions for 195 yards. But obviously, it's all about CJ Stroud. He went 20 for 26. Had a very clean game with no interceptions, no turnovers, 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. And ultimately, he has carried this team by the scruff of their neck and ultimately dragged them to that division title. And I couldn't be happier for Houston fans. I think he's been so good. We both love CJ Stroud. And I think, this is going to be called the CJ Stroud Appreciation Pod at some point because it's just been a brilliant, brilliant time for those Houston Texan fans.
Very true. And I think as low we've got the elation for the Houston fans, absolute commisery for the Indianapolis Colts fans because all season they've been happy to put the ball in Minshew's hands when everything had gone wrong with Anthony Richardson, even though he'd had a great start to the season. They were confident in Mr. Gardner Minshew. And you think, as you mentioned 2-minute drill, with 4th and 2 looming, and you've got it there, you have to put the ball in the hands of the players that you trust. And they didn't. And it's really, really cost them. And we see that a lot of the times with a lot of teams in the NFL, and it does cost them. How costly could this be for the Colts, knowing that it could be a tough year next year if Anthony Richardson is not fully back to where he's at? There could be issues with sort of the roster. Obviously, we saw that there was big paydays for, what's it called? What's the running back? Jonathan Taylor. God, it slipped my mind. There's been big paydays in the Colts, and they need to make sure that it keeps on running. Wow.
But if you pay a player like Jonathan Taylor, you pay him $15 million a year. Why do you leave him off the field in those key moments?
Embarrassing, isn't it?
The moments where you need your star players on the field to step up, be counted for, and make a play, he can't because he's on the sideline. A disgrace. And when you're 4th and 2 inside the red zone, you've got pressure in your face, and you've designed a play all week specifically for this moment, and it's a 3rd-string backup running back. I can't even fathom what Jonathan Taylor is going to be thinking. And yes, people say that the throw wasn't brilliant, but that ball should have been caught. Taryn, I would have expected you to complete that route, to be honest with you. I'd expected you to be celebrating in the end zone. They lost by 4 points ultimately. That play extends the drive, and they have pretty much 8 goes at the end zone if they can get a first down. I think it's shocking. And I think it is ultimately a coaching decision that kind of led to that. But looking ahead, it's really, really exciting for the Colts. They've finally got a bit of positivity. They finally got something about them for the first time since Andrew Luck left. And I can really see them kicking on next year, to be honest. I know Anthony Richardson, he's coming off an injury, and he might not be the quarterback that we all kind of think that we all saw this season. But in my opinion, I think he will be. I think he's got another year learning the playbook, another year understanding kind of his receivers and his O-line. And it's not a bad team, It's not a bad team all around. And if they can go to the draft and make some good free agent acquisitions this year, they could be really, really tasty. And that division as a whole is a really, really good one and a really young division, which is going to be exciting for years and years to come, Taron.
And you did talk about disgrace there with that 4th and 2 decision, but we'll move on to another disgrace in the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tennessee Titans in their divisional clash. My, oh my, they have fallen apart, have the Jacksonville lot. They looked absolutely formidable at the start of the season. Everything was clicking. Travis Etienne and the rest of his band of merry men, with Trevor Lawrence leading them, the man who they proclaimed was going to be the generational quarterback for him. And they've crumbled. So much so that they've now made a lot of decisions, getting rid of a lot of their coordinators. But it's absolutely embarrassing, I think, for the position that the Jaguars were in to get to the position where they're in now, where they won't be in the postseason. Again, what has gone wrong over there in Jacksonville?
I think for me, it comes down to the head coach. Now, you look at the teams that Doug Peterson's had in the past, and you're looking at that Philadelphia Eagles team that won a Super Bowl. They had grit, they had determination, they had courage. When they needed to be stood up and be counted for, they stood up and they stood tall. And this Jags team just looks like a house of paper cards. It looks like it couldn't. It's terrible. I don't think they have a backbone. They look like a set of absolute mollusks, mate. There's no vertebra between them. I just don't really know how they go from such a fantastic position where they're leading the division. They were leading the league in some respects at one point. They looked such an exciting team. Calvin Ridley on the edge was looking electric. He was looking brilliant. Etienne in the backfield. And then the defense was also making some really nice plays. To now this, I think it's shocking and it's a disgrace. And Doug Peterson needs to have some hard conversations this offseason. And they need to get some players with some backbones. Because like I said, just a team full of slugs and snails, mate. Nothing there. And how did your boy take it in the gap? How was he feeling after that loss? Was he not too happy?
He was very upset. And I watched it and it almost felt like you were watching a movie. It almost felt like you were on a night out, with the Jags. I saw the similarities. You're going out, you're feeling good, you're on a high, everything's going well. You've had a few things to drink, maybe met a few people, maybe got a few kisses. You don't know, but you're on a high. Everyone loves you. You are the man. You are everything that you want to be. And that's what it started for the Jags. But then we saw the slow decline. We saw the alcohol start kicking in. We saw the rubbish songs start playing. We saw the absolute abuse and the chants from the stands. And then it all starts falling apart. There's a few missed shots, a few missed opportunities. Everything falls apart. And then by the end of it, you just slip up to the very end because your divisional mate in this case, has thrown a banana skit on the floor and you slipped over in the club. You're giving everybody the ick. No one wants you. You're kicked out of the club where everyone else is having fun. And that has been the tale of the Jags this season. And that was a devastating evening for the Jaguars fan in my house. And you know what? They deserve it because, as you mentioned, if you can go from being formidable up there with the Eagles and the Niners at the start of the season to absolutely terrible, well, you don't deserve a seat at the table, in my opinion.
Very well said, sir. What an analogy that was.
Poetic, wasn't it?
Mate, that would give Clive Tilsley a run for his money. That would unbelievable from you, mate. You and Tony Romo are up there with some of the best commentators in the league. You can have that one. Unbelievable.
Thank you, mate. Well, why don't we commentate on the big moves that then happened with all the games concluding and all the action concluding? We've seen a lot of movement when it comes to organizations and the coaches and everything like that. So much so that at the point of recording, 4 head coaches have either been relieved of their duties or have moved on, where they're expected to be further sort of appointments and dismissals. Where do we even begin? I believe it's the Titans, it's the Falcons, it's the Commanders, and most recently, it's the Hawks as well. Wow. I mean, Vrabel, for me, I think he's great. The aura, obviously, he had a lot to contend with. They started well. Derrick Henry started well. The Titans started well. Then Tannehill goes down, and you've got Levis coming in, and he started well. But it just didn't seem to be enough in a lot of the games. And I saw a stat that he had, a positive win ratio, even with some of the quarterbacks that he had. He hasn't had an elite sort of quarterback in the last few years, and still he's managed to do extremely well, winning games, but just not enough to really sort of stake a claim and sort of push a bit later on. For the Titans, it's not looking pretty. Derrick Henry now needs re-signing, needs paying. What do they do? I know they've got Tajay Spears, who I think can have a great season next year, but the Titans just look like a franchise in a bit of disarray, don't you think?
I do, mate. I agree with you. Absolute stinker there.
Yeah, it got to you. The Titans really got to you.
Let's clear some mucus, but that was a bit too horrible. Right, we'll start with Derrick Henry. I don't know if you heard the speech that he had at the end of the game with the at the end of the game for the Titans. It sounded like a goodbye speech, in my opinion. Yeah. I don't think he's re-signing for that franchise. He's going to go and play his craft somewhere else. So where that will be, it will be really interesting to see. But then also, they're getting rid of Mike Vrabel. And that is a decision that I think has come out of nowhere, to be honest. Yeah. I think as a head coach, he's absolutely fantastic. In 6 seasons at the Titans, he's had 1 Coach of the Year in 2021. He's been to the postseason 4 times, and he's had an AFC Championship appearance. Mm-hmm. That is superb. From any coach in the league, that is superb. But especially when you consider that for the majority of that, his quarterback's been Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill, and then a rookie in Will Levis. And I think that's what he's managed to do with that team is simply sensational. He's been a very aggressive, offensive-minded head coach, and I think he'd be fantastic at many other destinations in the league. I can see him with Carolina, but I can also see him with the Atlanta Falcons, and that's where ultimately I think he's going to end up going. There's a lot of really good head coaches that are available this season. You look at the Dallas Cowboys coordinator in Dan Quinn. Then you also look at the head coach in the Michigan, the Wolverines. Obviously, he's kind of finished. He's kind of legacy there. He's won the national championship as Jim Harbaugh. So I can ultimately see him coming back to the NFL, back into the same league as his brother, and seeing how he can apply his craft here. But the Texans as a team need to give the red a wobble, to be honest with you, mate. Because why the owners have fired Mike Vrabel is completely beyond me. I think he's been a superb head coach, and I don't think he's going to struggle to find a job in this league.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about the Falcons there as well, and I tell you what, I've never despised a man more than that monopoly-looking ass, Donnie, over in Atlanta, because, oh my God, when I watch the Saints game and he starts whinging about the fact that they went for it at the very end, don't get me wrong, I respected it. It was absolutely cheeky from the Saints, but to be kicking off when you had an absolute stinking season, when you've been absolutely embarrassing despite all the tools that you've had at your disposal, the writing was on the wall for the Falcons and for Arthur Smith over there. We've talked about it before. I don't think we need to go into it again, but we know this franchise is going to be absolutely incredible. They've got all the pieces there. And like you mentioned, if Vrabel goes over there, wow. I think a lot of coaches could go over there and do a really good job. But Arthur Smith, you are a joker. You're a waste of time. You're a nobody. Good night. Get out of there.
Mate, if he'd have reacted like that a couple of minutes earlier, mate, right, when they scored the touchdown, I'd back it. They should have gone for fucking 2. They should have gone for 2 because he's an absolute baby. He's an absolute child. He needs to. I'm so happy that he's gone. How have you wasted Bijan Robinson? How have you wasted Drake London? How have you not got Kyle Pitts involved? That Atlanta offense should have been clicking and firing on all cylinders. I think they literally are a head coach away from being a postseason contender. And I think maybe a quarterback away. But there's going to be some quarterbacks available this offseason. So I definitely think that they're going to get an exciting young quarterback. Maybe Justin Fields, like we mentioned. I think that's a really good option for them. But if Mike Vrabel can go over to Atlanta, I think that's going to be really, really good to see. And I think that Atlanta Falcons are going to be a really scary proposition. Obviously, they've got this stadium, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, £3 billion, it cost to make. And it's unbelievable. And it deserves a franchise and a team that can live up and play in that stadium like a good NFL team. And it deserves a coach who is competent, because that is not what Arthur Smith was. Like you say, an absolute joke, man, and a disgrace of a man. And he needs to, along with Trevor Lawrence, hang his head in shame.
He does indeed. It's absolutely disgusting, absolutely embarrassing. Another franchise that's been embarrassing is the Commanders, another team who have had a good few wins in there. They've had a good few performances, but they just haven't been outstanding whatsoever. It wasn't a surprise, but now they've got the number 2 overall pick. They've got Sam Howell, who we don't know whether they're going to stick with him or whether they're going to move on from him. But another team who have the pieces there. You know, McLaurin is at a good start to the season. So did Brian Robinson. And they've got a good few players over there in Washington. And I think that hopefully with a good draft and a good coach, maybe. No, they're not going to do much, are they? Knowing the Washington lot.
Not
But
all.
a team who should be doing a lot more is the Seahawks, mate. Forget the Washington lot. Let's talk about the Seahawks, the big talking point. Pete Carroll. I absolutely despise him as well because he's just a wind-up. He's just a miserable. He just whinges. But the Seahawks, again, another team who had it all at their feet last season. And now a year later, it just seems to not all be there. And they miss out on the playoffs when they look like they probably had a way in. But Pete Carroll transitioning into the back office. Who comes in? Obviously, great serviceman for Seattle, but end of his time there, I suppose.
I think he's been on a decline ever since he didn't hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch at the 2-yard line, ultimately losing the Super Bowl to Malcolm Butler and the Patriots. Ever since then, his legacy's kind of been on the floor, really. But yeah, he has been a superb head coach. But I don't know what you think. I watch him on the sideline. I just think he's high all the time. He's just gnawing his jaw off all the time. It's just like he's swinging. He's on something. It looks like he's a warehouse project lad. He's just not like, he doesn't look like he should be a head coach in the league.
It's like Sean McVay looks like he's on the sniff half the time. The amount of times he has his fingers by his nose, it's sus, I'm telling you.
Mate, there's some mysterious things going on in the NFL. But I know people get like CeeDee Lamb got drug tested after his historic game. But I think they need to be doing a different sort of drug testing on the sideline, to be honest with you, because especially when you're in LA and there's not much to do in Seattle, to be fair, is there? So I don't blame them, actually. It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable, and they don't win much either. So to be fair, I think if I was in that situation, I think I'd have to put something on my nose. But where do they go now? I think the Seahawks are a team which are kind of, I don't think they want a young, exciting head coach. I don't see them going that way. I can see them going for the Wolverines coach in Harbaugh. And getting him involved. They want someone who knows his craft, who's a serial winner, and that's something that he's been able to do in Michigan. And they're in a really weird spot because Geno Smith is quite an old quarterback. He's a veteran QB who's only really come good in the last couple of years. I just think every player that puts that uniform on at this moment just, I don't know. I think the uniforms look really dead, mate. I just think they look like such a washed team. DK Metcalf, obviously, he's superb. He's brilliant. He's a big C, so to speak, lad. He's a big C. But other than that, I don't really see much more, to be honest with you. I think they are very mid-team. I can see them going from maybe pushing 9 wins next season at a push. I doubt it, to be honest with you. I think the line that we're going to set for them next season in terms of wins is more close to 6, to be honest with you. I can't see them doing much. And I think it's now the start of a rebuild in Seattle. So it's going to be a couple of years of mediocrity at best for the Seahawks. But I don't mind it because they were too good not too long ago. And to see them fall from grace like this is majestic, sir. Absolutely majestic. And I think you'll agree. As a Niners fan, you don't have much love for Seattle.
Beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And you know what? At least DK Metcalf can spend his off-season practicing his sign language and he can figure out how to sign, get me a head coach, please, or whatever nonsense he's been spouting about for the rest of the season. So at least he's got some free time. But like you said, they've got a lot of pieces there. They've got a lot of young rookies. Tyler Lockett's been really good. Jackson Smith and Jigba, probably not as utilised as we were expecting for the Seahawks this season. And they've got plenty on the defense side. Obviously, Witherspoon's been incredible as well. What a great pickup for the Hawks. But yes, I agree with you. They need experience. They need someone who can use these players, and they probably need to look at getting a new quarterback in and seeing how far this team can go. Otherwise, like you said, we're mulling around, doing absolutely nothing, and just acting exactly how they have been for the past season or two. But as long as the Seahawks aren't as good as they used to be, I'm a happy, happy man. But speaking of happy, happy men, why don't we move over to the sideline and talk about some interesting questions that we have for this. And that is, what if we talked about this head coaches and we've talked about a few scandals and, you know, you got to put that into mind when you answer this question. What if you could decide for one of these head coaches in the NFL to come over and start coaching in the Premier League? Why don't you give us the head coach that you're thinking of? And why don't you think about a team as well who you reckon could do with a new manager or reckon they'd fit well in? Who are you thinking, Elliot?
Ted Lasso, he's got to come over. And he's got to do his job. Put him in it, buddy. Who did he manage? Nando's FC, something like that. He was Richmond, wasn't it? He came in to manage Richmond. I think his legacy in the league was just superb. Winning the title with a really, really dog team, to be honest with you. Getting the players involved. But yeah.
Well, he had assistant players, Jamie Tart. Without that,
Jamie Tart is a system centre mid. It's a system centre mid. But looking at coaches kind of that are in the league now that could maybe do a job in the Premiership. I don't really know. Maybe I don't know if Bill Belichick could do a job at Man United. Because Man United look like a team now. They've got no backbone to them. Every manager's come in and just been absolutely washed. They look like a dead team. So maybe they need Bill Belichick to come in and just give him an absolute spike up the arse and just give him a bit of a shouting to. He might be a free agent anyway as a coach coming forward. So he might actually take up the offer on that, going over to the Glazers and having a chat with them. But I don't know. What do you think, Taryn? Who do you see kind of going over to the Premiership?
I have found quite possibly the most perfect fit for a man to come over to a club. Now, I was thinking about this. Mike Tomlin looks like a Crystal Palace manager more than anybody else. But the man who I'm picking is Mike McDaniel to go over and manage Brighton. Because, oh my Lord, he loves dynamic offenses. He loves it. He loves to attack. He loves to have these marquee players who just get the job done. But he also doesn't have it all there. He doesn't have all the pieces. They're good. They're not amazing. And can you imagine him down on the South Coast having the time of his life with his little vape in hand, dressed up in his little knee-high bloody trousers? He'd have a great time with all the banners about. He'd have a lovely old time. Mike McDaniel is the next Brighton coach. Robert De Zerbi, get out of there, pal. Mike McDaniel is taking your job. But I'll tell you what, De Zerbi, imagine the masterclass that we have going on in Miami with De Zerbi over there. What a switch this is. Get the training now.
That needs to be the differences as well between Brighton, a seaside town, and Miami. That's also a seaside town, isn't it? So swap them over.
In both places.
Yeah. That's another question as well. Do you reckon anyone else could make the switch from English football to NFL? What coach could go the other way? Because I've been having a think about this as well. I reckon Jurgen Klopp will be unbelievable.
He can do it
at any team. He wants a bit of an underdog where he wants to draft a young QB and kind of go with them and kind of ride that wave and develop the talent, as opposed to I could see Pep coming over and having a Patriots dynasty and winning the Super Bowl 10 years in a row or something like that. But other than that, I don't really see any fits anywhere. But I think Jurgen Klopp in a Dallas Cowboys star on the side of his head would be so exciting to watch. But yeah,
he's a niner, bro. He's a niner. Get out of it, man. Stop claiming him.
Nah, I reckon the German will come over and do an absolute job for the Cowboys. Put him ahead of Dan Quinn as head of the defense. I'll tell you what, that'd be unbelievable to see. But I think that's a question that we can delve into a bit more another time as well. That's another sideline for you.
Well, we know we'll have to wait to see what happens in this playoff run, what happens in the Super Bowl. You never know if the Cowboys have a vacancy. I'm sure Graham Potter or Pochettino can go over and give you guys a hand.
Behave. Graham Potter. Well, better than Graham Potter, mate. Behave yourself.
But as always, we've come to the conclusion of another podcast and another regular season of the NFL. Even though we only came halfway through, we came and conquered, upset a few Americans, and walked away with smiles. It's almost like history's repeating itself all over again, isn't it?
It's been a beautiful time. Yes, we came halfway through, but we've 100% delivered. So yeah, no one can complain other than spiteful Americans who give us shit every single week. But I'm here for it. Go on, give me more. I love the grief. Give me it.
And we love you guys. So please make sure to keep commenting. Lovely messages, horrible messages. We'll take them all. We're not picky whatsoever. And as always, keep enjoying this podcast. Keep returning because, as always, we send you back for more on this podcast when we bring the Brits. And we hope that you enjoy all the action that we've got coming up in the NFL. And we hope that you don't wake up one morning with Sam Allardyce as the head of your franchise. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next time on the All Out Brits podcast.
Peace.